great to be together this morning on this day. I was going to say sunny day. Hey, well done for everybody for Apple Day yesterday, wasn't that? And I don't know whether you were around for Apple Day. I saw some photos, we were away, but it just looked like an amazing time. So well done to everybody who organised such a fantastic community event. And I don't know if I could say the sun shone, but it didn't rain too much, did it? So did the sun shine, did it? I was in London and it was tipping down all day. See, the sun shines on the righteous. As I said earlier on, we're in the second and final part of our series called Change the Story. And we're thinking about the world that we live in. Every day there's a new headline with, concern for the state of our planet. Whether it's the varied sort of impact of climate change, whether it's the loss of biodiversity in our oceans, whether it's the loss of habitats for rare species and many, many other issues that we see and we hear about. And we're asking, as part of this series, as followers of Jesus, why should we care? And what has it got to do with our faith? And if you missed it last week, I just want to encourage you to go to our website, highgrove.church/talks, and you can have a little look at last year's talk. We talked a little bit about the fact that caring for the planet was all about fulfilling what Jesus said is the greatest commandment of all, which is to love God. And also it's about the inseparable second greatest commandment of all, which is to love our neighbour. And that's what this is all about. We talked about the mandate that God gave humankind back in Genesis chapter 2 to work the land and to care for the land. We recognise that the way in which we care or not for the environment has a really big impact on the very poorest in the world. And it has an impact on the legacy that we leave for future generations. We looked at realigning ourselves with God's view of the world and our role in it. And after all, He made the world, so he knows how it ticks. He understands it. He made us, so he understands us, and he knows how we tick. And we looked at Leviticus chapter 25 in the Bible, in the Old Testament, which contains God's instructions to the Israelites via Moses on Mount Sinai. It's well worth just diving into that chapter, Leviticus 25, near to the start of the Bible. And we briefly touched on this whole concept of Jubilee. That instead of taking and consuming, that we instead trust God for satisfaction and we trust God for contentment. And when that happens, that actually we find that the land gets a rest. That we find that the poor have a chance for the reset button to be pressed and to have a fair crack and a fair chance. And among the Oh, thank you. That's probably a good move. One of my earliest memories of church was my dad falling off a stage around about this high because his chair sort of it's horrible. He's fine. Among the very last things that Moses said to the Israelites before he died is recorded in Deuteronomy chapter 30. And he talks again of the choice that the people of God have to realign themselves with God. Deuteronomy chapter 30. Verse 15, and I'm just going to read it to you. He says this: "See, I set before you today life and prosperity, death and destruction. For I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, and to keep his commandments, decrees and vows and laws, Then you will live and increase, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away, and you're not obedient, and if you are drawn away to bow down to other gods and worship them, I declare to you this day that you will certainly be destroyed. You will not live long in the land you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. This day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God, listen to his voice, and hold fast to him." Now choose life. when it comes to caring for our world. We do have a choice to make about whether to align ourselves with God's ways and his commands, that mandate to steward and to care for the world. And our choices are really important. Our lifestyle choices are very important. And this morning, we're just going to be thinking really, really practically about our life choices in this whole area of caring for the planet. Now, the stage set up this morning have a striking resemblance to Blind Date, doesn't it? Do you think? Now, that would be quite a lot of fun, but that's not what we're going to do this morning. What we are going to do, we're going to hear from 3 of our church family this morning. We're going to hear about some of their own thoughts about their lives. We're going to hear about their thoughts about changing the story, and particularly about some of the choices that they are making. And just to be really honest about how that's working out. I just want a quick word of warning for you. A couple of quick things. One is that let's avoid 2 C's. Good preacher stuff. Avoid 2 C's this morning. One, let's avoid condemnation. The reality is God does never bring condemnation. So actually, this is one of those areas where we can feel just like a bit, oh my goodness me, I don't do that. Or feel a bit condemned or a bit flat or a bit flattened by what we hear. Actually, that's not the way that God works. So please, just avoid the temptation this morning to feel condemned. We can feel another C. We can feel challenged. And we can feel an I, which is inspired. But let's not feel condemned. And the second thing is, please, 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 let's avoid at all costs this morning comparison. Let's avoid comparison. It's one of those areas I think is so easy to compare ourselves with other people. Comparison only leads to 2 things. It either leads to pride or discouragement, and neither of those things are good things. So let's steer clear of those this morning. But what we're going to do, we're looking forward to be challenged and inspired by Richard, by Abby, and by Hannah. So why don't you welcome them to the stage? And not everybody here will know you guys. So maybe just take it in turns just to introduce yourself. Is that all right?
Yeah, I'm Abby, and I'm a 4th year medical student at the University of Bristol, and I've been here for 5 years now. It feels a long time, wow. But yeah.
So I'm Hannah. I've been here for about 12. I'm a dentist working over in Wiltshire. Yeah, that's about me.
I've never been called that before. I'm Richard. Most important thing is I'm married to Maggie. And we've been here 10 years. I work in the university. That's enough.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Brilliant. I'm going to start with Abby, and I'm just going to ask you, Abby, for you, what does your concern for the planet have to do with your faith?
I think it's one of those things where obviously we know like God created the planet, God created the world, and he just cares so deeply about it. And as Christians, like, we're called to reflect that heart. I think that was a very head thing for me for quite a long time. Like, you hear the story of creation. But I think it's recently, in recent years, that it's been a bit more of a heart thing. Like, I realise I have resources, and that kind of stewardship kind of commission we've been given actually does apply to me as well. So that's kind of been a bit of a realisation that I've had kind of to do with faith and the planet.
Cool, fantastic. And you're a student, so on a student budget. But how does this impact your choices and your actions? Your belief that caring for the planet matters. What does it look like for practice for you in your everyday life?
I think one thing that's been helpful is to look at it as little steps, because it can feel really overwhelming trying to change everything all at once otherwise. So I think for me it's been like a series of just making small changes where I can and with what I can. And so that's sort of looking like buying clothes from charity shops and trying to buy loose vegetables, not in plastic wrap, and those kind of things. And there's a zero waste shop open close to us, which is amazing, to pop down and just get a few bits and bobs. So it's kind of the small things and working from there. But yeah, I don't get it right all the time. So at the start of this term, I decided I was going to try and be vegan, because you hear about how great that is for the planet. And I lasted a grand total of a week and a half before Nando's happened. So it's not all easy all the time. And small steps, I think, yeah. I think another thing which I found, I went to this talk which was talking about ethical living, and they were saying about seeing little things as acts of worship. And that really, I think, changed my mindset a bit, because it feels like the big things are all a bit too much. What can you do? But when you're like giving them to God, like I'm going to choose to buy this thing which isn't in plastic because that's what God's heart is. It feels a bit more doable, and you're giving it to him, and he can grow those small things. So that's another mindset change I think I've had.
Fantastic, thank you, Richard. I know you're someone who cares deeply about the environment, about environmental justice. Why is that for you, and what difference does that make in your everyday life?
So just picking up on the two great commandments you just mentioned, and begs the question, who is my neighbour? And thinking about the environment, last week Maria mentioned how people in Beira in Mozambique had been affected by the horrendous cyclone back in March. And we can empathise, we can have compassion over those people, partly because Paul and Maria have been there, but in a way they're our neighbours. And parts of the world are most affected by climate change or poor environmental stewardship, and they've done least to create that situation. So that's one aspect of justice. The other thing is, Maggie and I are fortunate enough to be grandparents, so we have little ones and we hope they have a good life ahead of them. But looking at some of the projections, it may not be as good as the life that I've enjoyed, and it may be as the consequence of my generation's choices, and that brings a certain sadness to me. What can I do, though? What can I do? Because hope's got to be the big thing. I actually, in terms of justice, I quite like writing letters to MPs, and well, it may sound rather sad me doing stuff like that, but or maybe even my university, who are now divested from fossil fuels, and choice of who you bank with, and then actions you can do within your own home, and so we things like solar panels. We're fortunate in things like that to be able to make that as a possibility. And
for you, what are some? Sorry, this is a little extra question I haven't even warned you about. What are some of what are the easy things and what are the really hard things that you do?
The easy things are we can do things in our own garden, because actually it's quite enjoyable to do things that grow our own food and then eat it. The hardest things are probably where you really have to do something that you know is possibly going to hurt the environment. So, I don't know, every time we drive our car, or sometimes I have to take plane flights for work, and those are tricky things, because there's sometimes it's really hard to know exactly the right thing to do, and the world's complex, and each individual ends up having to make choices that maybe are less than ideal. But that's where having a community together is really important.
Thank you. Hannah, so I heard an amazing thing. So you are taking part in the Bristol City Council's Zero Waste Challenge. Tell us a bit about that and what it's all about, how it came about.
So we're taking part in a Zero Waste Challenge that's being run by Bristol Waste. So they're the people that come around and collect all your rubbish every week and all your recycling. At the beginning of the year, they advertised on the local news for households to sign up to this. I was on maternity leave at the time and thought, we need more of a challenge. A newborn baby is not enough, so let's find something else to fill my time. Joking aside, we wanted to take part for various reasons. A new baby, we wanted to set a good example to him, kind of foster habits in him that actually become normal rather than kind of an effort, which is what we're finding. Our responsibilities as Christians to the planet, and also just have a little bit of account on the issue as well. When you've got people constantly asking you about it, it makes those things a little bit, you have to stick to it a little bit more. So the challenge involves 50 households across Bristol of different demographics, so some families, some single people, some sort of really super large families, people that live all over the city as well. It started on the 1st of April this year, and it's running for a whole year, so we've still got quite a long way to go. The aim of it is that we'd get down to absolutely zero waste within a year. So that's no general rubbish and no recycling, so everything, either gets composted, or we have a wormery now. We have pet worms. This is what my life is. Which Bertie loves. It seems that they are literally pets. So that's kind of the ultimate aim. The softer aim of it is that Bristol Waste have said they want us all to reduce our general waste by half of what it was to start with. So every week we weigh all of our rubbish, all of our recycling, and we submit lots of information to them. They're running the challenge for a few reasons. So partly because they want to see us do well, they want to see us reduce our waste. We then pass on our tips to other people, who then pass them on to more people, and eventually Bristol can start to change. The other side of it is that we are passing loads of information back to them. So actually they're in a better place than us as individuals to start making kind of wider changes with companies across Bristol.
Amazing. That sounds super difficult, actually. I was just trying to think about in my life how on earth that would work. But, how are you finding it? What are you learning through it? What are you finding challenging? What are you finding easier than expected?
So we are finding it super difficult. We went in initially with all guns blazing. We can do this. Within a week, we'd failed completely and utterly. We found that we were having lots of conversations about it, but actually we just ended up feeling really judged, really rubbish. We definitely got sucked into a comparison game of, well, they're doing this better than us, why aren't we doing that? We just ended up feeling really guilty and really rubbish. I read lots of blogs because I was on maternity leave, and I came across a quote which has really stuck with me, that actually we don't need those 50 households across Bristol doing zero waste perfectly. We need everybody to be doing it imperfectly. And that doesn't mean we're giving ourselves an excuse. It doesn't mean that we're having an easy ride of it. It means that actually we're being realistic about it. And we end up doing more that way than if we just feel overwhelmed. I know various things in life I felt so overwhelmed, you just bury your head in the sand and hope it all goes away. But actually, if you take it a little bit more realistically, you can get more stuff done. So some changes are super easy. So many people this morning have brought reusable cups with them, whereas a year ago, that number was a lot less. So we're all doing really well on that. Most of the things that we've changed have got pros and cons. So we now have a milkman, which is great because I can, at 9 o'clock at night, decide we need more milk for morning, and I wake up and it's there the next morning. The challenge to that is a lot more expensive than buying it in the supermarket. So, pros and cons. We are fortunate in Bristol, we've got loads of zero waste shops, which are really helpful. And a lot of people that are doing the challenge are finding that they have pretty much reduced their food packaging waste through zero waste shops, greengrocers, butchers. We are not those people. We find that really difficult. We've got a small child, we've got limited time, we both work. That actually, making a Saturday activity out of doing the food shopping is not my idea of fun. It might be for some people, but it's not for me. So actually, that's really hard work. So we're buying some things now zero waste without packaging. We're buying those things in bulk, which is really, really helpful. But actually, just with your normal supermarket shop, there are things you can do. So we get through ridiculous amounts of yogurt in our house. So we buy big pots and we decant that rather than buying lots of small pots. The big pots are reusable for so many things. So that's a really simple thing that can be done. You can buy lots of cereal in supermarkets now in paper bags, which is fantastic. Fruit and veg, you can buy a lot more of that loose in supermarkets, which again is really straightforward and really helpful. I guess the final thing that I want to say is that there's a danger for us doing this challenge that we're getting very caught up in zero waste. And looking after the planet isn't all about waste. There are lots of other issues, and I've got myself caught up in knots so many times trying to work out, do I ditch plastic completely and just buy stuff in glass? But then the extra fuel that's been used to transport heavy glass, what's the best thing to do there? We're using reusable nappies for our little one, but then we're using a lot more water to wash them. Do you buy, this was a big decision that I had to spend ages in a supermarket about, do I buy fair trade bananas in plastic, or do I buy loose non-fair trade ones? And a lot of supermarkets now are doing loose fair trade, which is great. My point is that it's really difficult, but there are lots of people just within Highgrove that know so much stuff. And if we talk about it as a community, then we're going to be a lot more successful, and we've got a much better level of accountability.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love what you said. Everybody doing it imperfectly. All together, sort of doing our bit. It's fantastic. I think it deserves a clap, doesn't it? That was really good. Abby. Some people might feel that these issues are just absolutely huge. These sort of kind of environmental things we're talking about, using big words like biodiversity and all that sort of stuff. They might feel like it's just so big and so complex that how on earth can my little bit make any difference at all? How on earth can I make a difference? What do you think about that? What would you say to anyone who feels a bit like that?
I feel like I can totally sympathise. There are so many times when you just hear the news and it just feels overwhelming. I know I've been walking through supermarkets sometimes and just feeling like this is too much, too many choices, too much to take in, and what do you do with that? And I think that's why it's so much better to kind of pray about these things. We can't do it on our own. We need to do our bit, but also recognise that God is the one who can ultimately change this. So kind of pairing our actions with prayer, I think, is really important. We might not feel like we can reach those high levels, but God can, and He is. And so I think really praying in that can really help when you're feeling like this is all too much. Also community, like you were saying, I think I've just found it so encouraging talking to people who are struggling with the same things, being like, what do you decide? Which one is better? And chatting about that and just realising that no one's got the answers, but if we all talk about it together, we can kind of muddle our way through. That's so important. And as a church, we've got such a great opportunity for that. We already do that a lot of the time, so I think that's just amazing. And yeah, I think it's not getting drawn into that comparison game and that blame game. Trying to just do what we can. And I think another good thing is reading good news stories. There is good news out there. There are people planting rainforests back up again. There are people doing cafes with no waste. And I think hearing those things and realizing people are making changes and are making a difference, take that as encouragement and do what you can to kind of your little bit as part of that.
Thank you so much. And Richard, there's no doubt that as Christians, we need to be people of action. We need to be people that do something in this thing. But actually, we also want to be people of prayer. So how do you think that we as Christians should and can be praying about this whole thing?
Actually, some of you may subscribe to Tear Fund. And if you've ever seen their prayer diary, at the moment there's a 3-week sequence in which something to do with creation is there all the time, and it's often a story, an individual story from a particular country, which combines. There's often sadness or about a situation, but often it emphasises hope. Hope is the one thing I think the church has the key for. We've got a God who will never give up, or a God who seems to specialise in getting us out of the messes we've created ourselves. And I think praying for that rising of hope is something individually, corporately we can do. And we can take the world by the hand and we can say, we could do this. We've got a good God who believes in that. That's one of the main things. Perhaps a sort of almost praying for an openness and hospitality, because there will be victims of a changing climate, and we will see more refugees in this country, and having that compassionate heart and asking God to open our hearts and make it possible for the things that may seem hard.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Let's give these guys a round of applause, shall we? They've been amazing, haven't they? Thank you. It might very well be that you've got lots to share yourself and lots to contribute, and just encourage you to join the conversation around that, really. That can be something we can do together, sort of over coffee, but actually whether it's via our Facebook community in various different ways. I know there's been quite a lot of action on that already, and just chatting a bit about some of the ins and outs. We are, together, what we can do is actually incredible, and so we really want to sort of prioritise that and spur one another on in love and good deeds. Going to do, just before we finish with a closing worship song this morning, is to say a prayer all together. And this prayer will appear on the screen, so hopefully you have a chance to read it through. And actually, this prayer starts with a sorry. It starts with a sorry to God that actually we have been part of contributing in terms of spoiling creation around us. So I just want to encourage you to join with this if you would like to. And here we go. Almighty God, creator, shaper, and sustainer of all life, we confess that we have been careless with the creation that you so lovingly crafted. Because of our greed and carelessness, the world is hurting, and many of the most vulnerable are suffering as a result. Please forgive our indifference. We pray for people who are hungry because of failed harvests and dry riverbeds, for people who are homeless because of unpredictable or extreme weather, for people who are struggling to make a living in ever more challenging circumstances. Please help, provide, and protect. Give us the strength we need to play our part in restoring your world, to act justly, and to walk humbly. May our love for our neighbours, even those far from us, make known our love for you. Amen. Amen. And Lord, would you fill us up and send us out? May we be people that, full of your Spirit, are prompted by you in the choices that we make in this world. I pray, Lord, today, any sort of heaviness that anyone feels around this kind of topic would ebb away. Lord, actually, for all of us, however rich we are, however we feel poor, Lord, however we feel the challenges are in our lives, I thank you, Lord, that there are small ways in which we can be part of that imperfect response, Lord, to this challenge. So I pray, Lord, you speak to us today and as we go about this week. Amen.